and welcome to tonight's Listen and Learn with HISD Superintendent of Schools Richard Carranza. I'm your host, Ashley Anthony, with the HISD Media Relations Department. Joining me tonight is, of course, the man of the hour, Superintendent Carranza.
Hi, Ashley.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We are live streaming this broadcast on the district's website, Facebook page, and on the HISD TV channel. There are several ways you can participate and deliver your question or comment directly to the superintendent. You can email us at askthesup@houstonisd.org. You can tweet us using the hashtag AskTheSup. If you are joining us on Facebook, you can post a question directly in the comment section. Or if you prefer, you can call us at 713-556-8901. We have staff from the Office of Communications standing by to answer your phone calls, and they are also monitoring email and social media for your questions or comments. But first, let's get to know a little bit more about HISD Superintendent Richard Carranza. So let's start with your own education and upbringing. Tell us about the impact public education has had on your life.
Well, I'm a big supporter of public education. Were it not for a public education, public schools, I wouldn't get to do what I get to do every single day, which is serve, children in this community. I entered the public schools in Tucson, Arizona as a speaking only Spanish. I was what would be considered an English language learner. And while my parents were both bilingual, English and Spanish speakers, they chose to have my brother and I speak only Spanish until we went to the public schools and trusted that the public schools would teach us English. So I am a big supporter. Were it not for those incredible teachers and administrators and support staff, I wouldn't have become a bilingual individual. So I'm a big supporter of public education.
So I'm sure you can relate to a lot of our students here who are bilingual learners.
Oh, absolutely. I know exactly what they're going through. And then later on, as a teacher, where I was a bilingual teacher, I know what it's like to build classroom environments so that you scaffold learning and you're able to support students in learning a second language and becoming bilingual. And our hope in Houston is that students not only become bilingual, they become trilingual, quadrilingual. We want students to speak as many languages as they would love to speak.
So you've been at the district for a little over 2 months now, and you spent most of your time traveling as part of your Listen and Learn tour.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Tell us, what did you learn from the tour?
Well, it's been an exhilarating experience having gone to every corner of the greater Houston area and into communities. And one of the things that I really appreciated was that we didn't hold these meetings here at the central office at the Hattie Mae Learning Center. We actually went out into the communities, and the trustees were great in hosting these meetings, and the communities were fantastic in setting up and advertising and making sure that we had a good representation of the community. But I've learned so much because I've heard from family members and community members and staff members about what they like that's going well in the district, and then some of the things that they perhaps think I should put on my radar to look into, some challenges, in some cases some things where they've said, these things aren't equitable or they're concerns to the community. So through these conversations, I think the community has gotten to know me and experience who I am, where I'm coming from, but more than anything, I've really gotten an opportunity to hear from our community and listen to our community in a very authentic way, those things that they are really appreciating, and then some of the challenges that we have ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things you let the community know what was on your radar at these meetings was equity. Why are you so passionate about equity in public education?
Well, I think, equity is a term that gets bandied about quite a bit, and it gets defined in certain ways, usually to benefit whoever is kind of talking about equity in whatever way they want to talk about it. So I've been really clear about defining for the community what I mean by equity. And what I mean by equity is it truly means giving the student what they need to meet the bar that we've set academically. We know that there are students that walk through the thresholds of our schools every single day that are already excelling academically, have already started to read when they come into the first grade, students that are doing advanced math. Well, there's no way that we want to keep those students just there. We want to continue to enrich and accelerate those students so that they get the kind of education that they need to continue to excel. But we also know that there are many students, Houston, this world-class city, over 80% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch, which is a poverty index. So we know that there are students that are walking through our classroom doors every day that are suffering from societal ills, whether that be they're in foster care or they're suffering from hunger or homelessness or dependency in the family, we also know that those students need an environment and need supports, not so that we're lowering any academic bar, but that we're helping to support them to reach the academic bar that we've set in Houston. Because we know that if students are able to get their high school diploma, and if students are able to go beyond the high school experience into a post-secondary experience, we know that that can change the life of not only the student, but the entire life trajectory of a family. So it's really not work that we're doing because it's educational work. Equity is really about saving lives and investing in the future of Houston.
And you mentioned support and the support that our students receive. At a few of the meetings, you said you don't believe in parent engagement, but rather you believe in parent empowerment. So tell us, what exactly does that mean?
Well, that's always kind of a conversation stopper when I say in a very declarative way, I don't believe in parent engagement. And people look at me a little sideways, think, what's he talking
what's
about?
That?
What is that? But parent engagement is a very low bar. I mean, you can set a meeting and have a parent meeting at a school, and parents will by and large come. But I guarantee you that a student that's mistreated by a peer in a school, I guarantee you that parent's going to engage. A student who applies to one of the magnet programs or one of the Vanguard programs doesn't get in, I guarantee you the parent's going to engage. So engagement is a low bar. What's, I think, more profound and transformative for us is to empower our parents. So it's really about parent empowerment. And how do you empower parents? You empower parents by being transparent as a school district. You empower parents, I believe, by giving parents the information that they need and they want to be able to advocate for their children. And I know that we're very blessed in Houston that we have parents that are very well informed, that know dates, that know what the curriculum looks like, that they know what their child should know and be able to do at the end of the 3rd grade, at the end of the 4th grade, at the end of the 7th grade. That's an empowered parent, because that empowered parent can advocate for their child, but that parent can also have really substantive conversations about next steps when they go to their parent-teacher conferences. See, that's empowerment. It's knowledge, it's information, and its ability to access the system.
And it's building them up.
It's building them up, and I think that's what we want. We want empowered parents.
Okay, and I know you talked about those next steps. So for you, what are some of your next steps looking forward? So the tour is over now, so what direction and are you thinking about taking the district in now?
So, the Listen and Learn tour, folks have said, wow, you're out all the time. Well, it's true.
Yeah.
So we've had over 25 Listen and Learn tour stops. I've had another about 15, which wouldn't be considered Listen and Learn tour stops, but they've been individual meetings with organizations all across the city. Excuse me. So what I'm doing is I'm taking everything that we've learned. We've captured every comment, we've captured every question. And what we're doing is I'm going to present to the Board of Education, the trustees, in December at the public board meeting. I will present to them what I've learned.
Okay.
And with that presentation, I'll talk about some of the themes that have kind of risen through all of these conversations.
Equity being one of those.
Equity would be one of them. The issue of centralization versus decentralization is the other. Arts programming, libraries, sports. Just to name a few, but I'll present what I've heard and the themes that have really resonated as part of the tour. And then the trustees and I will have a conversation about what our next steps are, because we've heard from our community. So the next steps will be, what do we do then as a team of 10 to really address some of the concerns and some of the ideas that we've heard from the community. But it's going to be informed by the community, which I'm really, really excited about.
Great. So we're going to get to some of those questions and concerns from the community that we've got submitted in as a part of this virtual town hall meeting. We have several folks who submitted pre-submitted questions for tonight, so let's get to some of those. But first, I want to remind viewers how to participate and submit their own questions or comments for Superintendent Carranza. You can email us at askthesoup@houstonISD.org. You can tweet us using the hashtag #AskTheSoup. If you are joining us on Facebook, you can post a question directly in the comment section, or give us a call at 713-556-8901. Okay, so let's get to some of those pre-submitted questions that came in. First up is, this question comes from a parent named Alana. In light of the recent presidential election, I am concerned about an increase in bullying and racist or sexist behavior. Does HISD have a plan to combat this?
Well, we have more than a plan. We have policies. We have district policies that specifically prohibit any of that kind of behavior. So what we've done is immediately following the election, we've communicated with our school principals, because school principals have a pulse of what's happening at their schools. So we've communicated to the school principals a series of resources, reminders about where policies are kept. What we've also done is reminded school sites that schools should be safe zones. So we know that there are some families and some students that reached out to us, and we're very concerned about, what had been spoken about in the presidential election around immigration and deportations, et cetera. So we reminded folks that there's Supreme Court case law that talks about enrolling students in public schools. We also talked about school sites are safe. We talked about the constitutional right by Supreme Court decision that all students have to enter our school sites without fear of deportation or any of those kinds of roundups. So what we've been doing is working with our principals, and principals are working with their school sites to reassure parents, reassure students, and make sure that everyone understands that our school sites will continue to operate as the safe havens that they have been prior to the election and post-election. And to this point, we're hearing back from our principals that there is a sense of calm that is starting to permeate our campuses. Again, I want to reiterate that it's the Board of Trustees' intention and policy, and it is the administration's policy, that schools will be safe and enriching learning zones. So any kind of harassment or bullying will absolutely not be tolerated.
In addition to the policy aspect, I know we've even equipped our principals with resources that they can use in the classroom on how to talk to their students about the recent election.
Absolutely. And what we've done is, where it's not an issue, we haven't wanted to make it an issue, but in campuses where, this has really risen as an issue, principals are well equipped to be able to work with their school communities.
Let's get to another pre-submitted question. This comes from an employee this time by the name of Olga. I heard on the news that the TEA was penalizing school districts for giving special education services to more than 8.5% of their students. The latest I heard was that they plan to suspend this policy. How does this affect HISD?
Well, first and foremost, I'm really glad that TEA is suspending the policy that they had in place. I will tell you that, excuse me, in the 2 months that I've been on the job, I've looked into this particular issue with HISD, and there's absolutely no evidence that we've been adhering to any kind of artificial cap on the identification of special ed students or students with disabilities. That will never be the policy under my watch here in HISD. What I can tell you is that we are working hard every single day to try to make sure that all of the students get what they need, and that includes our students with individualized education plans. So I'm really happy to hear that TEA has taken that step. But again, there's no evidence we've ever had that kind of a policy here in HISD, and we would never support that anyway.
Okay, great. Another pre-submitted question comes from an employee by the name of Mike. Many HISD students come to school with issues in their personal and family life, which make it very difficult for them to concentrate and focus on their schoolwork. These students and their families need support and services beyond the classroom. How are you and the district going to address these needs?
These are for employees.
Beyond even addressing some of the needs of some of the students who come to school beyond the classroom.
Sure. Well, one of the initiatives that has started prior to my arrival, but I am a big supporter of, is the whole issue or the whole process or strategy of wraparound services. So recognizing that, schools are a microcosm of society, and I mentioned previously how students come through our threshold, walk through our threshold, suffering from any of the societal ills that you can think of. We want teachers teaching, and we know that we are really supporting really compassionate, passionate, effective educators. But understanding that teachers teach, we don't expect teachers to be social workers or nurses or dietitians or clinical counselors or psychologists. But we do know that when teachers identify a student that may have that kind of a need, we should have some kind of a system where teachers can refer a student to that picks up that student and connects them with the services, or connects that family with the services that they need.
That's just one of the realities I think we face as an urban public education system.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about wraparound services for our students in our community. So we have some great examples of that. One of the first examples is Kashmere High School.
Yeah, I visited that one.
Which has an incredible partnership with Unitas, Pro Unitas, and they're doing exactly that. And you can identify what an issue is of a student or their family, and they're able to be connected with the resources in the community to help with that particular issue. So the whole goal here is not to become all things for all people, but understanding that, Howard Maslow's hierarchy of needs, talked about this way back, where if students don't feel safe, if they don't feel comfortable, if they don't have their most basic needs met, they cannot learn. So our goal is to make sure that we can connect students with the resources they need so that they can feel comfortable, can feel supported, and can physically be in a position where they can learn.
Great, and that's what we all truly want.
Yes.
So another pre-submitted question. We have gotten several questions from parents regarding magnet schools. One parent says magnet schools are critically important options for motivated students and wants to know if you intend to continue them. Another may be frustrated that some magnets give preference to neighborhood children and others do not. Another wants to know when HISD will expand the Vanguard magnets at the high school level. So just what are your thoughts in general about our magnet system? We've got a tremendous magnet program in the district.
Yeah, well, one of the great benefits of HISD is its magnets and how they've developed and incredible partnerships that have developed as a result of the magnet programs. So we're actually looking at our magnet programs because we also realize that there should be some semblance of representation of magnets throughout the city. So one of the things that I've asked for is to have an internal audit of where our magnet programs placed. The other thing that I think is important is that you have to have access to magnet programming. So where they're placed geographically around the city is critically important.
Yeah, that's where equity comes into play again.
That's where equity actually absolutely comes into play. Another important aspect of a magnet program is, magnet programs are very specialized, but there are underlying pedagogical tenets of magnet programs that are just good practices. So part of what we're really looking at, and we have a great chief academic officer that's on board. We have a new deputy superintendent, and part of their marching orders let's look at how we can promulgate some of these great practices across the schools of our city, so that they're not isolated or just set up in one particular part of the city. Now, this is something obviously that's not going to happen overnight, but it's also part of that transparency that I talked about identifying what are some of the challenges and then how we're going to go about trying to address some of those challenges.
And we're currently in the midst of the magnet application period right now, so I'm sure a lot of families are interested in that.
Yeah, and one of the things I was really excited about is I had the opportunity last week to spend the whole Saturday morning at Austin High School where we had our magnet and choice fair. And I want to really applaud our magnet and choice office for organizing that, because these fairs have now gone on in different parts of the city this year and have given the opportunity for people to learn about all of the choices in HISD all across the city. It was an incredible experience, and one that I really appreciate, and we're going to continue to do that.
Great, and we've got something for everyone, for parents to kind of match what their children's needs are and what their interests are with a great program that the district has. So hopefully that people continue to take advantage of that. So another question comes from a teacher by the name of Giovanni. I like this one. I saw you sing and perform when you were announced as the new superintendent, and I think everybody pretty much caught that. You are a very talented musician. What is your opinion of the current state of arts education at HISD?
I would really like to increase not only the amount of art education that we have in the district, but also see it also diversify across the district. So one of the things that I've paid particular attention to, and quite honestly, that's one of the themes that has really bubbled up in my community conversations, is this theme of we want to educate the whole child. So I've often said in my conversations with the community, I think it's really important that children know how to read and to write and do arithmetic, but I also think it's just as important they have something to read about and something to write about. And in many cases, that is the arts. It's the ability to sing or to dance or to play an instrument or to move or to draw or to paint or to have the spoken word. So I think that, Houston is in a place where there's a hunger for a real increase in the footprint of arts education in our city. And I really want to be part of that effort to really bring art and arts education to every school in the HISD.
And can you tell us a little bit just about personally how you got engaged in arts education as a child and even as an adult?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, I had the fortune in the public schools that I went to that I got to take band in the 4th grade. So
What did you play?
I played the saxophone.
Okay.
So I played the saxophone in the band. But before I ever touched the saxophone, my dad played guitar. He was self-taught, but my dad and his uncles, and my earliest memories were of, family cookouts. Every weekend, everybody got together, and the guitars always came out, and everybody sang. And for me, as a 5, 6-year-old kid, I'd want to stay up with all the adults while they're singing, and they'd say, no, the only people stay up are the people playing guitar. So that made me want to play guitar. But what was so powerful for me in my personal experience was that I had this rich cultural immersion in the music that my dad played and my uncles played and they sung, and the music we heard played on Spanish language radio in Tucson. And then I went to school and I learned how to read music and I learned how to play the saxophone in the band. And when I was able to marry those two experiences, it made me a richer person, I think. It made me appreciate different kinds of art form.
Yeah.
So I've been a big supporter of the arts since before I went to public school.
And gave you that balance that we want so many of our students to have.
Hey, I can't play golf, but I can sure strum my guitar every now and then.
I can't either. So we have some live questions coming in now through the phone lines and on social media. Once again, I want to remind viewers how to participate and how to submit their own questions or comments for Superintendent Carranza. You can email us at askthesup@houstonisd.org. You can tweet us using the hashtag AskTheSoup. If you are joining us on Facebook, go ahead and post a question directly in our comment section. Or if you prefer, give us a call at 713-556-8901. So this is a live question. Someone named Millie Henriquez. The question is, what are your thoughts about the dual language program? What kind of support are you planning to provide for teachers and administrators at these campuses? And this question came via email.
Great. So dual language programs, I think, are great programs. So I'm a supporter of dual language, but I'm a supporter of high quality dual language programs. So I think you have to be very thoughtful when you implement a dual language program, because it's not just the dual language and the pedagogy that goes with dual language, but what model are you implementing? Is it a one-way dual immersion? Is it a dual language? What is it? I think you have to have incredible buy-in from the community to be able to support and sustain a dual language program. But I think the other part that you have to think about is you have to think about the articulation. So if you have dual language programs in an elementary school, then you should have identified where those students could matriculate to at the middle school level to continue with a dual language track. And then obviously in the high school, so that a student could see the trajectory from kindergarten all the way through high school and the graduation. I'm not convinced yet, and again, I'm only 2 months into the role, I'm not convinced we've done that kind of work yet. So my direction so far is that we're going to hit the pause button. We're going to evaluate the programs that we have in place, make sure that they're high quality programs, make sure that we're providing the rich professional development for our teachers in those programs, that they're adequately resourced so that we're adequately preparing our students to go on to the next level. And then at the same time, look at those questions of articulation and where those students go. The ultimate vision or dream that I would have for our dual language programs is that a student would be able to progress all the way through their educational experience in the Houston Independent School District. And by the time they get to high school, that on that high school diploma, we could affix a seal that says a seal of biliteracy. This is a good housekeeping seal of approval that this student is biliterate, bicultural, bilingual. I think that has some real value in a global world and with our global graduate profile.
I agree. And is that the situation you were in when you finished high school? You were coming out learning 2 languages?
No, unfortunately, there weren't any, biliterate seals. It was just basically, could I have a conversation with my dad and not switch to English? That's how I knew I was bilingual. But I think, in my previous experience, in my previous superintendency, we were able to actually establish a biliteracy seal, which then the state of California then adopted as a best practice. So it's doable, but you have to be very thoughtful about it, and you have to be very strategic about it, and you have to resource the program. So that we're in that process right now.
Let's get to another question that came in live. This one came over through the phones from Roberto. What do you plan to do to bring up the test scores of the 13 high schools who have not met state standards?
Well, academic achievement is very important. So again, it's part of being very thoughtful and being very strategic about what it is. You almost have to think of it as visiting a doctor's office. When you walk in a doctor's office, you're going to get asked questions. You're going to get an exam. You're going to get a diagnosis. And once you have that diagnosis, there's a prescription. And hopefully the doctor will talk to you about what that prescription is, and you will agree this is where you're going. But there's sometimes where medically you have to do what you got to do. So that's very similar to how I view how we support our school sites. I don't think there's a one size that fits all, because all of our communities are very different. So I think it's really important that we understand what the community is, where the community is, the context of where our schools are. But then we also know a thing or two about what good pedagogy is and what good teaching looks like and what support services look like. I mentioned Kashmir High School. Kashmir, I'm telling you right now, is doing some incredible work at providing wraparound services which students in that community really need. So we've done the diagnosis there, and the prescription is we're going to have a community-based approach in that high school, while at the same time really ramping up the instructional practices, being really tight on what we're teaching, but not narrowing the curriculum so that there's no room for anything else. That's the one thing that we will not do. We will not narrow the curriculum so that all students do is do English, math, social studies, and science all day. Those are important, but they also have to be able to apply those skill sets. So it's not simple, and it's not simplistic, but it does require us to be thoughtful. And I'm really excited about the work that's going to happen with all of those school sites. The other thing that I would say is that I would just caution the public about being so tied to test scores that they make a declaration about what a school is, whether it's a good school or a bad school. And I can tell you that, as I walk schools, and I walk schools every week, I'm in schools, walking schools unannounced. And I will tell you some incredible teaching that's happening, some incredible learning that's happening.
Some incredible students.
And incredible students that are coming to us. But, in schools, there's a line that students must meet, which, statistically may be significant, but it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
You could move that line to show whether or not you met the goal or not. What doesn't get credit is in a school that I just walked last week, where students come in reading 3-4 grade levels behind, and by the end of the year they've made up 3 grade levels. They're almost at grade level. That particular
progress.
School, that student, they've made up 3 grade levels in 1 year. They're still reading below grade level, so they're still going to get a label. See, that's the kind of really complex, very, very nuanced work that is happening in our school sites. And it's unfair sometimes for them to get labeled as failing schools when they're doing incredible work.
Yeah, it is unfair. And I know you addressed that in some of your listen and learns around the communities. Yeah. So another question from an employee, this by the name of Lucinda. Over the past several years, HISD has planned to increase its dual language program at the elementary school level. Do you plan to continue this expansion? I think you talked about that a little bit earlier about your thoughts on dual language right now, so I don't know how you want to.
Talked about that. So again, we're kind of playing. We're gonna hold in place. We're evaluating what we're doing, making sure we're building high quality programs, making sure we have robust support and professional development for our teachers and resources for those programs, as we're planning for what the articulation looks like for those programs.
Great. So this question comes from a parent. I want to know why parent's name is Sandra. I want to know why some schools are permitted to forego early dismissals on the district indicated days. This produces problems for parents having students at schools which are dismissed early, as older siblings are unavailable to care for their younger ones.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a decentralized system here in HISD. Decentralized meaning that school sites get to make some decisions. So there are parameters within which school sites can make those decisions, especially on those issues of early release. What I would encourage our parent to do that asked this question is to make sure that that's communicated to the principal, and make sure that those child care issues are brought up so that the principal is aware of those particular issues. There is a process that schools must go through to get those plans approved, so that it would also be good to copy whoever the supervisor is of that school, so that it's on our radar as well.
All right, now we have a live question again. This one comes from Facebook, from Sarah Hassan. When will the district change its policy on testing kindergarten students for gifted and talented, known as GT?
Yeah. So, again, I've been on the job 2 months. One of the big questions I have is, how do you test pre-K kids for gifted and talented?
At such an early age.
That's a question for that I have as well. So we're asking that question because I think, in a perfect world, you're providing robust programming for all students during the developmental stages. There's contradicting literature out there about how early you can test students for giftedness and what is giftedness, and how are you addressing issues of cultural bias, and how are you addressing issues of second language. So that is a huge issue, and I'm glad that the question's been asked, because that's also something that I'm asking myself as well. Understanding that there's a context, there's probably a reason why that's been happening for this time period here in Houston, but that's a question that I'm asking as well.
Okay, we have another question from someone about GT as well, but more so about what are we doing to make sure that our programs are including some of our minority children, Black and Hispanic students, and making sure that they are also some of the students involved in our gifted, talented, and our Vanguard programs, to make sure, like you said, things are equitable. Yeah,
well, if you look at just the data, you're going to see an incredible inequity or misrepresentation or non-representation of certain student demographics in some of those programs. Because you start identifying kids that early, again, we're talking about issues of socioeconomic status, we're talking about issues of language, you're talking about issues of empowered parents knowing that they should, right now, here we are in November, right now parents are starting to contact the office about it, evaluating their pre-K students. Do all parents know that? No. So see, that's part of the knowledge, that's power. So there's so many confounding variables that go into why students get identified early, that I think it really behooves us to pause, take a look, ask the hard question, and then figure out, are we actually doing this in a way that we could all stand behind and say, yeah, we feel good about this.
Great. So this is another live question, came through via email from Heather. Would you consider reshaping the trustee districts? I can only vote for one. This makes it hard to hold trustees accountable.
Well, that's beyond my authority. One of the things that the trustees and I are working hard to do is to build a board where, and I've referred earlier in this segment as the team of 10, well, 9 trustees and a superintendent. The trustees have one employee, and that's me. And I have 9 bosses. So,
lucky you, right?
Right. So the only way that we can be effective is that, trustees get elected from their districts to represent the interests of their districts. And that's important. But it's also important that when the trustees sit in banc, when they sit together at the dais, they are truly representing the entire district. And there has to be the ability to come, and I think our trustees by and large are able to do this, often come together to decide this may not be the ultimately best thing it may not benefit my district directly, but it benefits the greater district. So I'm going to be in favor of this, or I'm going to be against something. So I think that that's a constant struggle that at the governance level that trustees have to navigate. But in my experience so far, I haven't seen that be an issue. But I do think that if voters are interested in that kind of a question about, trustee districts and changing those, that is something that they should start talking to trustees about.
Okay, so this is another pre-submitted question. This one comes from a parent, Rolanda. Many elementary schools in HISD need new buildings. I know we are in the midst of rebuilding high school, but what is the plan to update and improve our elementary schools?
Well, we have a continuous program of trying to keep our buildings up and running and refurbishing our buildings. They're not the rebuilds that we're doing right now with a bond. But my goal, quite frankly, is to show the public that we can actually take that bond and we can actually build what we've promised to build in that bond, and have the preeminent portfolio of high schools in the nation. If anybody's walked through the schools that have already been built or the schools that are in the drawing board of being built, they are phenomenal 22nd century learning buildings. They're going to be phenomenal. So in the not too distant future, our goal would be to come back to the voters and say, look what we've been able to do. Let's ask for your support to take on now another swath of our community as well.
Great. So I know we're going to get a question on the screen next up, right?
Great.
This is another way how you can submit your questions. We're just reminding you all how you can submit your questions. You can email them to askthesup@houstonisd.org. You can also tweet us at askthesup and Facebook us at facebook.com/HoustonISD, or give us a call at 713-556-8901. And we have the Office of Communications still standing by, taking your phone calls and monitoring email and social media, and taking your questions and your comments and making sure we directly share those with the Superintendent, Richard Carranza, who's still with us this hour. So continue to call us and continue to tweet us and post on Facebook with your questions and your comments. All right, so let's get to another question. This one comes from a parent, Carlos. Currently, every high school student is provided with a laptop. What are your plans to close the digital divide at the middle and elementary school levels?
Well, we have our Power Up initiative, which is providing laptops, and Carlos is absolutely right. It's focused at the high school level now. But the whole implementation plan of Power Up has always been that we would eventually go pre-K-12. So we're going to continue along that path, and as we, keep implementing and rolling out new grades and new schools, our goal is to eventually get the entire district to be able to access digital technology.
Great. So another live question via Twitter from Elias Rodriguez. What are some practices that you would recommend new teachers avoid?
Good question. When I graduated from my teacher preparation program and did my student teaching 28 years ago, my master teacher said to me, don't smile until Christmas. Don't let them see you smile till Christmas. That way they know you're serious. That was 28 years ago. That could have not been more wrong, right? Because that's not the kind of environment that we live in,
How do you connect with the students if you're always
Well, students aren't going to want to know
Yeah.
what you know until they know you care.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes. So, my advice to teachers would be yourself. You're not going to fool the kids. They're going to see you coming a mile away.
That's so
They're going to
true.
know if you're authentic or not. They're not going to necessarily know every single thing that you talk about in your content area, but they will know if you're invested in them and you really want them to succeed. So I would say that. The other thing I would say is that, it's not a bad practice to have kids resubmit work until they get it right. I mean, no one ever said that the standard says you have to get it right the first time you turn it in. What the standard says is you have to get it right. So if it takes them twice, let them turn it in twice. If it takes them 3 times, let it turn in twice. Now, is that more work on the teacher? Of course, and I've been a teacher, I get it. But if the goal,
process of learning.
right,
Yeah.
if the goal is to get students to master something, then give them the opportunity to master it. Believe me, they will become more and more invested in your subject area, in your class, in your grade, if they know that you really want them to succeed.
Great. And on several times, I can count the times. Well, I probably can't count the times I needed that second chance, that second
Sure.
or third chance to get it right. So
Absolutely.
we need to be the type of district that makes sure our students have those opportunities as well. So this question, another live question from email, Mary. Her name comes from Mary. I would like to know your vision for HISD school libraries. How can you attain that vision? What are your visions for improvement along our literacy efforts in our school libraries?
Well, this is a great question, and I have to get kudos to all of our librarians because they seem to come out at every community meeting that I had. Somebody asked a question about librarians, so I've been doing a little bit of homework, and I think that it's important to have a 21st century library in schools. I think that kids should be able to access information ubiquitously, and they do. But I think that students should be able to discern what is legitimate information, what's cured information, what's just plain out opinion that's masquerading as fact. And I think librarians have a great skill set to be able to do that in a 21st century school environment, librarians are also technologists. So they're able to help students learn how to use databases and find databases and do searches. And so I think those are all critically important skill sets, not the least of which to mention that at the elementary school level, librarians are great at pulling together collections that are interesting to students so that students not only read for purpose, but they can also read for pleasure. I think all of those things are important. But we have something, and this is one of the themes that's kind of percolating through all of these conversations, something we call decentralization in HISD. So through decentralization, and maybe it's an unintended consequence, but school communities have made choices whether or not to fund their libraries or not. And that's part of the homework that I've been doing. Why is it that some schools don't have libraries? Some schools do have libraries.
Yeah.
In many of those cases, schools or whoever at the school makes a decision has made the decision that they're going to use that funding somewhere else, or they're not going to allocate funding for that. It's called decentralization.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think schools should have to make those tough decisions like that?
Well, as a principal, I think, it's hard enough being a principal without, having to make some choices about what do I fund or don't fund. And again, we're talking about austere budgets, so I don't blame principals. This isn't about blaming principals. But I also think that as a school district, we're not a confederation of independent schools. That is not what HISD is. We're an independent school district. So if we're an independent school district, we should stand for certain things, right? So what I'm going to advocate for is I think we should have arts in all of our schools. I think that we should have a library in all of our schools. I think we should have a nurse. I think in some cases we need social workers in our school sites. Now, the question becomes, how do you pay for it? Well, if you apply an equity lens to your budget, then those are some things that we have to prioritize if that's what we believe in as a school district. But we put our schools, I think, in an untenable situation sometimes where we ask them to, make the Sophie's choice.
Pick and choose.
Are you going to pick this? Are you going to pick that? And then later on it comes, I'm the new guy. So when I get asked these questions and I go ask the question, and it turns out that, well, yeah, that school doesn't have a library, but 5 years ago they decided they were going to forego the library to do something else. Well, yeah, you could say that's decentralization. They made the choice. But I think the bigger question is, how unfair is it for them to even have to have made that choice? So lots of work to do and lots of questions to continue to be asked.
So you mentioned you're the new guy. You're the new guy here at HISD, but you're not new to public education. And this question kind of centers around it. This question comes from Twitter, from Kelly. So she wants to know, is being a superintendent all that it's cracked up to be, or what you thought it would be like?
This is absolutely, bar none, without a doubt, the best job in the world. It's the best job in the world. And when you think about it, if you look at just the job description, I'm the CEO of the 7th largest organization in the country, the largest organization in the state of Texas. We have almost a $2 billion operating budget, 29,000 employees, almost 216,000 direct consumers. And then if you think of their parents and their guardians and their caregivers, over 1 million. How HISD goes will affect the future economy of Houston and the future economy of Texas. Whoa, it's a big job.
Very big job.
But you know what I get to do? Every week, and sometimes twice a week, I get to go out and visit classrooms where I get to see students engaged in the process that I'm responsible for. I get to see teachers who are committing their life's work to helping the next generation. I get to see hardworking principals and community members coming in and wrapping around and helping people be successful. So I think that, in many respects, the work that I get to do as a superintendent is not only the work of a CEO, but it's the work of really impacting the future. And I think when you think of the superintendent's role in that way, it's very rewarding. Now, does it have its downsides? Well, sure. At its heart, I'm a bureaucrat. I'm part of a governmental agency, right? There are rules to follow. There are policies to follow. Yes. I get it. And there are protocols to keep in mind as well. So there's that aspect of the job. But I'll tell you, as a teacher, a trained teacher who thought I was going to retire as a high school bilingual social studies teacher / mariachi teacher. I sometimes hearken for the day where, I had 6 classes of kids come through my classroom every day, and I got to build relationships with them and see them grow and develop as people. So I miss that, but I think as long as I don't forget that that's what I'm trying to impact, everything I do every day should be so that I'm empowering teachers in a classroom, or I'm empowering students, or creating conditions so that that magic can happen that happens in a classroom. As long as I don't forget that, then this job continues to be my life's calling, which is what I consider it to be. The minute I start reading my own press clippings or believing everything that I talked about in terms of the CEO role, then it's time to do something else, because you need somebody in a superintendent role anywhere that believes in kids first.
And I've personally heard you encourage your staff to go out into classrooms and not just sit behind the desk all the time. Why is that so important, even for them to see? They may not have the role that you have, but it's important. Why do you think it's important for them to get out there in our schools as well?
Well, just a little hint of coming attractions. At some point, once I've been here for more than 2 months, I'm going to ask all of our central staff that's certificated to substitute teach in a classroom one day. And I think it's so powerful because prior to coming to Houston, in my previous school district, I actually shadowed a 6th grade student for a whole day. Met her at her home, rode the bus with her to school, went to all of her class periods, went to lunch, got to hang out, kind of be the fly on the wall. Yeah. This poor child was so well adjusted, she didn't mind me doing this, right? But I have to tell you, it was brutal. The schedule that a 6th grade student follows, where they go from class to class, where they sit, where they get, where they sometimes have an opportunity to express themselves, oftentimes they don't. They're trying to get so much information because it's going to be on the test, or it's going to be on the assignment, or it's going to be on the assessment. And students have very little time to actually interact and use the information that they're learning and discuss it and be kids. It was brutal, and it really continued to inform my approach, I think, and my orientation as to what schools should be and perhaps what schools shouldn't be. So I think it's just really valuable for us to, that's why I go every week. I'm in schools every single week, and I don't want the entourage. It's unannounced. I drop in, I walk in, we walk in, I meet the principal. If the principal's not there, I meet whoever's in charge, and let's go walk the school.
So you see what's really going on.
You see what's going on, and you see what the conditions are in our schools. I gotta tell you, I've been very impressed in Houston, but there are areas that we need to work on.
So let's get back to some of these questions from that we're getting coming in right now. So this one came from Facebook from a parent named Elizabeth. My child attends a Title I school. How will you show that all schools are important, even if they are not, the premier schools, as she writes?
Well, that's the work of equity. So that's exactly what I'm talking about, Elizabeth. How are we going to make sure that her student in that Title I school that may not be a magnet, may not be a Vanguard, may not be a choice school, that is a neighborhood school, a Title I school, that her child has access to all of the enrichment, has access to all of the beyond the classroom experiences that any student in any specialized program could have. I think that's what public education is, and I know that the citizens and the residents of Houston, as I've gone out and interacted with our community, that's what their hope is, that's what their dream is. And I think that that's something that if we're clear about, that's the goal that we're moving towards, I think we could actually work very closely and actually make that happen.
Right. So another parent question via Facebook from Margarita. What qualities do you look for in aspiring school leaders?
They have to be people. They have to love the little people, and they have to love the big people. Because the further you move away from the classroom, the more of the big people you work with. Right. So as a superintendent, most of my day is working with adults. So I have to like to work with people. As a teacher, I work with younger people. But I think what you can't fake, and I talked about this a little bit earlier in one of the responses, was you can't fake whether you're authentic or not. You really have to want to do this work. So what I look for, and I interview, and by the way, I personally interview every candidate, final candidate for a principalship and an assistant principalship position. They all interview with me. And it's not that I want to micromanage, but it is because I want to make sure that the folks that are going out into our schools and that are being charged with the incredible responsibility of leading a school community have the right orientation, that have the community at heart, that have the students at heart. The technical skills, if you make it through the interview process, you've got the technical skills, you know a thing or two. But can you apply the thing or two that you know in the appropriate way to empower communities, to lead communities? Are you going to be part of the equity conversation and be a willing part of that equity conversation? And then I can point to people that are just great examples of what I'm talking about. You know, we have two of probably the longest serving high school principals in the state of Texas, Bertie Simmons and Dr. Lemon. 50 plus years, both of them been in their positions. Why in the world would somebody work 50 plus years in the same job? It can't be because they're getting rich. It's
that
because
passion.
they love what they do. They're passionate about it. I think that's kind of the qualities that we want to have in every one of our school leaders.
All right, so one other question. This is pre-submitted from a parent, Carlos. Currently, every high school student, oh, you know what, hold on, we have this one already.
I think Carlos went already.
That. So this is pre-submitted from Lauren, a parent. I know there is nothing we can do about the STAR test, but what about all the other tests our kids take, like benchmarks and snapshots? When do they get to learn when all they do is take tests?
Well, I think it's important for students to be able to read, write, and do arithmetic, and as a teacher, I want to have the best diagnostic to understand where are my students. So do they know what they're supposed to know? And if not, that gives me an idea. That's the craft part of my profession, that I can go back and I can reteach or structure it in a different way so that students are getting what they need. So I think it's important for us to have actionable data in that way. I think that the testing regime, not just in Texas, not just in Houston, but in America, has kind of gone overboard, where we want everything to be a metric. Well, we're not making widgets, to the millimeter of tolerance. We're educating souls, and when you educate souls, you should know where they are, but you should also create environments where students are able to express and be themselves as well. So we are actually, right now as we speak, we started this about a month ago, we're actually looking at our entire testing schedule. We're looking at what tests are self-imposed, so which tests are required by the federal government, what tests are required by the state of Texas, what tests have we as a matter of policy in HISD said we're going to do to ourselves, and I would not be surprised that before Christmas or Christmas break, winter break, that we will make some announcements about a decrease in some of the testing that we're doing.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. So this one also comes from a parent, Lenny. Some classrooms at my child's elementary school have 29 to 30 students in them, while some have way less. So why is that when I thought the law was 22 to 1?
Yeah, so there are something called waivers that the board has to vote on. I can tell you that our goal is to comply with the class caps on every single classroom. I can tell you that those waivers have significantly reduced. This year was a significant reduction from last year. But I can also tell you that there are schools that are really popular, that you have siblings that are going to those schools, and you have a number of kids that are going to those schools. So what we're trying to be is very thoughtful about how we enroll our students and then what those caps look like. And again, those waivers are really down this year, and our goal is to get down to 0.
Okay, that's great. All right, so this one comes from Tangela. She's an employee. I've heard you passionately speak about student achievement goals. However, can you share some of your expectations regarding employees and customer service?
Well, here's where I land on this, and working with people is not always easy because people are passionate, and sometimes we have folks that come in that are in crisis or have just a really important issue, or let you feel like your baby's been mistreated. You're going to have a roaring mama coming in at you. So I get that and I understand that. But for our employees, we have to remember that we're in the people business. If we did not have parents or students, none of us would have a job. We exist because we have students and we have parents. And that's why we're here. We're here to serve our community. Now, are we here to get abused by the community? Absolutely not. Are we here to be mistreated by the community? Absolutely not. But we are here to serve the community. And, you know, in my work, I've found, you know, having been a teacher, having been a principal, a school site administrator, I have found that even in some of the most difficult circumstances, if you lead with the attitude of, I'm here to serve you, I'm here to help you resolve your issue. How can I help you? A little smile goes a long way.
Long way. Yeah.
So I think, you know, we have to remember we're in the customer service business, and there are going to be some issues that we can't resolve. But there are mechanisms that, you know, we are a bureaucracy. There are mechanisms that are available for us to be able to resolve or connect people with the resolution that they need. And we know that we're not going to make everybody happy all the time, but I think our attitude does a lot to really set the conditions by which people will interact with us.
I agree. So this is another pre-submitted question from an employee, Marlene, and you talked a little bit about this earlier when we talked about the need for having a librarian and a nurse at all of our schools. So her question is, what is the district doing to address the shortage of school counselors in schools, especially at the high school level?
Yeah, so we can never have enough counselors, but one of the things that we've been able to do is we partnered with the HISD Foundation. HISD Foundation partnered with some philanthropists across the city, so we had an influx this past year of counselors at all the high school level. I forget the exact number, but we almost doubled the number of counselors that we had. We saw an incredible increase in the number of students that applied for not only financial aid, but applied for college and post-secondary opportunities. That has gone so well that we are asking to expand that program to move it into the middle school, so that we're starting earlier with our middle school students. So we're really trying to do the best that we can to bring additional resources so that we can bolster the amount of counseling that we have in our secondary schools.
All right, so I think we have time for one more question. So we've got about 5 minutes left. And this question, we had something similar to this, but it was about, comes from a teacher who is an inspiring administrator and also wants to know what vision do you have for your future leaders, even some of your cabinet you're shaping here at HISD. What vision do you have for them in terms of being effective educators?
Yeah, well, I think I've talked a little bit about that, you know, over the course of this hour. We have to remember we're in a people business. You know, what we do is educate souls. We don't educate widgets. So we all look at spreadsheets, and you know, when you think about almost 216,000 students in the Houston Independent School District, those could easily become numbers on a spreadsheet. We have to remember that those are people, and that they have a life story, they have a history, they have wants and needs just like everyone else. And we have to remember that when we're working with students, they're not a number, they are a human being. And so are their parents and their caregivers and their loved ones. So my vision is just that we will be an effective, humane organization. I think that's what we want, and that's what I think the voters and the residents of Houston want for their children, to come to a place where they feel welcome, and they come into an environment where they feel supported and empowered to go on.
So last question. So I know you just started here a couple months ago, but you've got to have some thoughts already in your mind. What do you want your legacy here at HISD to be? You know, why did you even choose Houston? What do you want your legacy to be when you see yourself going on?
Well, I am just thrilled to be in Houston. I feel like I'm at home. I really don't ever want to go anywhere. I love the people already. The people, everyone has made me feel so at home. There's a way of life in Houston that's very special. And I'm just thrilled to be part of this. I think it's way too early for me to think about legacy, but what I do want, you know, my father, who is no longer with me, was one of my first and best teachers, and my dad always said, you know, you have your name, Carranza. He said, don't ever besmirch your name, and always make it so that your family can be proud of you and your name. So I lived my life that way. So my hope would be that people would say, I may not have agreed with the guy, but he was always honest, he was always open, he was always who he was, and there was nobody that worked harder than him.
That's beautiful. So you know, we've run out of time, so we're wrapping things up. And I appreciate you joining us and doing this again virtually.
My pleasure.
I want to personally thank Superintendent Carranza for joining us tonight and for answering our viewer questions and comments. And thanks to everyone at home watching on HISD TV and to those joining us virtually via the internet and on social media. If your question or comment did not get answered tonight, do not worry, it will make its way to the superintendent. We have volunteers from the Office of Communications who are collecting every comment or question that came in through email, social media, and the phone lines this evening. They will be providing this information directly to the superintendent and his support staff. I'm Ashley Anthony, and this has been a production of HISD TV. Stick around, we'll be doing it all again at 7:30 p.m. this evening, but this time it will be in Spanish. Thanks again for joining us, and have a good night.